Okay, once again, welcome everyone.
Recording in progress.
I'll ask everybody to please mute yourselves as you come in to make sure everything works all right. Once again, also feel free to say hello, where you're from in the chat, just so everybody gets a little bit of a sense of who's coming in and who's participating, etc. A couple of things as we start to get started. We'll do some introductions to kick things off, and then a few housekeeping items to make sure everything works smoothly. And then we'll begin. We have 2 hours scheduled. We don't know if we'll take all that time, but we're here to answer questions and assist you. So we're prepared to spend the next couple hours together. So, all right, I'm going to kick us off with some introductions. Welcome. My name is Thomas Hostaba with Climate Kick, and I'm the coordinator of Net Zero Cities. And I have with me a few colleagues from the Commission and the Joint Research Center who are going to help with this, share information with you as part of this webinar and help to answer any questions that you may have. I'll introduce those in a minute. I just want to remind everyone this is the second of 3 webinars that you would have been informed about if you registered and signed up through the Commission's website for the mission. This one is going to focus primarily on current policies and ambition. We'll go through those portions of the expression of interest, questionnaire, and answer questions as appropriate. The first webinar last week, we'll be sharing a little bit with you in a minute about some of the discussion and the link to listen to that if you weren't able to join that one. And then we'll talk about the one that we'll have the third and final one next week. So with that, I'm just going to very briefly introduce the 3 mission and commission representatives who are going to speak today. Vika with DG Research and Innovation and part of the mission team, Nadia Vetters and Julia Olpiani with the Joint Research Center, who will be speaking about the questionnaire and the answering questions around that topic. So I'm going to moderate and try to facilitate the questions and make sure we can get to everyone's questions as we go. A couple of pieces of housekeeping. We have there's a normal chat thread in the Zoom call, which everyone's using to say hello in now. I would say because this is a webinar, there's a Q&A window as well. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's Q&A. And please use that Q&A window for questions so that we can help to try to manage the flow of the questions efficiently. We're going to go through and talk about a couple of sections of the questionnaire. We'll try to work through those in chunks and then try to have a broader question and answer period in between those 2 sections. We'll also try to answer simple, informative questions in real time in the chat, in the Q&A window. So pay attention. If you put a question in there and you want to get the answer, pay attention to that. And you may see some answers flowing throughout the discussion at the same time. I will try to manage the flow relatively efficiently and pause where we need time and space for questions and discussion. But we will try to get some of the information presented efficiently and effectively before we open it up for Q&A, because a lot of times you'll find the information is coming and your question may get answered in the course of the flow of the discussion. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started. And again, I'll try to monitor things. This will be recorded and shared. So anything that's discussed, you'll be able to come back and listen to again if that's helpful, or share with any of your colleagues at your city as appropriate. So we'll keep that in mind as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce and turn it over to Vika to get us started. Vika, take it away.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Wiebke Pankauke. I work in the unit in DG RTD of the Commission that hosts the Secretariat for the city's mission. And I'm here today replacing Philippe Voisin, who you met in the first edition of this webinar. So before we carry on with our guided tour of the questionnaire, I just wanted to briefly recall the different information resources that we have already made available. And we've included all the links here. So firstly, there is, as you probably already know by this stage, the info kit for cities that has really all the practical information that you will need if you want to apply to the call. So there is a first part with the practical information, the information about the process, about the different eligibility criteria, about the stages, what will happen next, and also the obligations and the benefits for cities in becoming part of the mission. In addition, we have put together a document of frequently asked questions, which we are updating constantly as new questions come in. So do check it regularly and see if there may be new answers that have come up, for example, also in the follow-up of these meetings with quite specific questions in some cases. I've also included here the register, the link to actually register to respond to the call for expression of interest, as well as a preview of the questionnaire in PDF format where you can see all the questions offline as well. And maybe briefly, as Thomas already said, to recall what was discussed at the first webinar last week. This webinar covered the first part of the questionnaire, so the eligibility criteria, the additional information that we are asking cities to supply, and also the section on current emissions. So if you have missed that first webinar, the recording is available and you can see the link here. Maybe it's useful at this point to just briefly cover 3 issues that were discussed last week, but where we also have seen that there are a number of questions that have reached us through various channels by email, for example, and that maybe it's worth recalling. So in terms of eligibility, the threshold for this call is for cities or for entities of at least 50,000 inhabitants. There is an exception for countries with less than 5 cities of more than 100,000 inhabitants. And I've included here the list of countries that this applies to again, where then a lower threshold of 10,000 inhabitants applies. So this is a strict threshold, I'm afraid. So we can't make any exceptions here, but that I also want to really stress is not the end of it for smaller entities, for smaller cities. So please do keep on following the news on the mission. You can subscribe to our newsletter, for example, and follow what is happening on the website, because later on in the process, there will also be possibilities for smaller entities to become involved in exchanges, in learning of exchanges of good practice, in twinning activities, and so on. Secondly, on groupings of cities, that was discussed last time as well. I'd like to recall the general idea that we have put in the sense that normally the call is addressed to cities, but groupings are possible. But we would like to see those groupings of cities that are really geographically adjacent, so contiguous, and that have a single entity that actually has an authority to make decisions on the issues that are relevant for the mission. And what does that mean in practice in terms of filling in the questionnaire? This was also mentioned last week, that in principle it means that metropolitan regions should fill in 1 questionnaire and groupings of cities should fill out 1 questionnaire each, and then pointing out, of course, making it quite clear that they are a member of a group. Now, we know that there may be several special cases where you might think that this does not really quite apply to you, or might also cause you practical difficulties in individual circumstances. So then in that case, we would invite you to get in touch with us by email, and we can then get back to you and maybe suggest what you could do in your particular case. And lastly, in terms of contact points for cities, we have seen a number of cities where we have already received requests to register for the questionnaire for more than one person. And there we would really ask you please that you only register once for the questionnaire. As it was explained last time, it is possible for several people to work on the questionnaire, sharing the same link, and you don't need to have several questionnaires to work on them. On the contrary, that complicates a little bit for us the process to deal with such cases, to then identify which is the final questionnaire that we should take into account for the evaluation. So please make sure that there's one contact point per city. And then finally, there's the next webinar that will cover the last part of the questionnaire, which will happen next week. So that will cover capital needs, barriers and assistance needs. So make sure you follow that as well, or watch the recording afterwards. And again, just to recall, how do you get in touch with us? If you have questions, like on the cases that I just mentioned, then don't hesitate to email us. Best is to use this functional mailbox that we have indicated here. And do follow also what's happening on our website, and subscribe to the newsletter to really not miss any updates. And for now, I would leave it here and hand back over to Thomas. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. That gives everybody a bit of a introduction and background. Some of you, I'm sure, were probably part of the webinar last week as well. So you're both familiar with the conversation, but also aware of how things are moving here. So we will figure out how to share these links with you per the request in the chat thread. These links are also available on the website where you signed up to register for the webinar. So we'll make sure to connect the dots on that as we go through here. What I'd like to do is invite Nadia Vetters from the JRC to come in now, and she's going to start to walk you through the EOI questionnaire as it relates to current policies. And so what I'd like to do is try to get us through this section and then circle back and answer questions that might be emerging. As I noted before, if something starts to really bubble up that we need to stop and address, I'll try to pause for us and address it as we go. But hopefully we can be efficient with everyone's time. There's more than 225 people on here, so we can be efficient and allowed to get through this section and then open it up for questions. And if you keep your eye on the Q&A window, we'll be answering questions as we go as well, that are easily answered in a simple response. So with that, Nadia, can you come on in and get us started?
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you all can already see my screen. For those of you who are participating for the first time today, my name is Nadia Vetters, and I work for the Energy Efficiency and Renewables Unit of the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. And today, together with my colleague Julia, it will be our pleasure to walk you indeed through the questionnaire. We'll have maybe 2 times 20 minutes or so to go through this 4th tab of the questionnaire, and then the 2nd part of the 5th tab of the questionnaire. And indeed, just like in the first webinar, we'll go together and review the questions one by one, and we'll provide you additional information or background where this is relevant. We'll do so hands-on, indeed, going straight to the questionnaire, looking at it at the EU survey platform. Before we go directly to the questions, there is one technical aspect that I did not explicitly mention, I think, during the last webinar, and that is that the survey automatically times out after 1 hour of inactivity. We mentioned that it's anyways a good practice to save a draft of the questionnaire frequently, but just to make sure that you're aware that once the survey times out due to inactivity, it can happen that unsafe data is lost. And this can be obviously a very frustrating experience, so please do make sure that you save your draft frequently. All of these recommendations are summarized here in the user guide that you find on the right, and yeah, you can consult at any point. And of course, please, you can also reach out to us through the contact form or the email address for any technical questions that may arise additionally. Now, to the content, we do have today an interesting tab to cover of the questionnaire. It starts with a set of 2 questions that do focus on existing targets in your city. One set of these questions is forward-looking, meaning it refers to any future targets that your city is currently already working towards. And the second set of questions, so sorry, I'm trying to move my mouse and it's not doing what I want. So the second set of questions would be looking to targets that your city had set itself in the past. We start with the forward-looking targets with the question whether your city has officially adopted a greenhouse gas emission reduction target for the future. When we say officially adopted, what we mean is that a target is anchored in a strategy or a plan or any other policy document that your city has adopted, or targets that have been adopted by your city officially joining a specific initiative that is setting emission reduction targets. In general, these targets could be based on the city's own initiative and ambition, but they could also result from a legal obligation that is set by the national government, for example. Another point that I wanted to highlight is that we are not referring to the climate neutrality target that comes along with joining the city's mission. Of course, unless your city has already officially adopted such a target in the past prior now to expressing the interest, but that then of course this coincides. But the climate neutrality target that is linked to the city's mission, this is covered in the 5th tab, and we spoke about this in the last webinar. Then one more thing to specify before going into the details is that it does not necessarily have to be an explicit greenhouse gas emission reduction in the classical form of like city X will reduce its citywide greenhouse gas emissions by minus 60% by 2040 compared to 2005 or something along those lines. It could very well be a sector level target or a target for increasing the share of the renewable energy, or a target even that indirectly leads to emission reduction, like a target that could be linked to the deep renovation of the existing building stock by a certain target year or something along those lines. Of course, if your city has adopted several targets similar to those that I just mentioned, do please refer to the most ambitious and the most comprehensive target, meaning the one the target that is best aligned with the targets of the city's mission. So if you select a yes here in the questionnaire, you will see a series of additional questions appearing. In the first question, we are asking you to specify the target and to provide a reference. So in doing so, it is recommendable that you stick to the original formulation of the target, but like in general, also for the rest of the questionnaire, translate it to English if that is possible for you, and if necessary, please add here any additional information if the target statement alone is like not self-standing or not self-explanatory. So ideally, you would add to this description a specification of the target type, whether it is a baseline year emissions target or a baseline scenario target. You can mention the target boundary, meaning if this is a citywide or sector-specific target, or any other information that simply helps that one clearly can understand the scope of the target in question. When you look down the questionnaire, indeed several of these aspects are captured by other questions that come below. But here in this first box, in this verbal description, it's really intended to help put all this information into context. Yeah, please do fill the information here, even if some of the aspects are covered then by specific follow-up questions below. Please also do specify the origin of the target. Later on then, down here, you can upload the respective document where this target originates from. Well, now that I've spoken about this, maybe a general remark. Indeed, in the different sections or parts of the survey, you have the option to upload supporting documentation. And this may contain part or all of the information that you are asked to actually provide by answering to the questions. So maybe you wonder, like, why are we doing this? Why do you need to repeat this information? Or you may consider that you just leave the questions blank because anyways, you have provided the document. So here we do very much understand this causes slightly more work for you, but we'd still like to encourage you to provide all the information as part of your answers to the questions, as generally the experts that will then have a chance to review your expressions will rely on the answers, and they won't consult the supplementary documents, or let's say they will consult them on a needs basis, for example, to clarify some specific aspects. Now, well, back to our questionnaire. The next question asks you to please specify the sectors that are covered by your target. We did speak about these sectors in a little bit more detail in last week's webinar. What I'd like to say here is that they are indeed used as a proxy, like as macro sectors. This means that if your target covers a subsector of a sector, like I don't know, your target covers stationary energy and everything but the residential buildings, then you can still select this sector. What is important, however, then is that you do make sure that the details that you provided in the verbal description, well, the details become clear from this verbal description that you provide initially. Then we are moving to the next question. This does apply, like the specification of the reduction percentage. It applies to targets which do have an explicit numerical reduction percentage. So here the value you should please enter as a number, not with a minus, not with a percentage, simply the number. For all the other targets, if, for example, you have a fixed level target, one that specifies, I don't know, a certain volume of CO2 that is reduced by a certain date, then all these information should be covered in the verbal description that you provided above. Then we move on to the target boundary relative to your city's administrative boundary. This does refer to the geographical coverage of the target, not to the sectors or the sources covered. So if it is a citywide target, you select same as the city, even if the target, for example, only covers transport. If the target, however, covers only a specific district, then smaller applies. It can be that, for example, your city refers to a target under the Covenant of Mayors that results from a joint commitment with a neighboring community, and then larger would apply. And I mean, the fourth here, that's a rather peculiar situation that's more here provided for the sake of completeness. Then the next question, if your target is a base year emissions target or a similar target that refers to a baseline year, please do provide it here. Again, even if it was specified already above in the verbal description. The same applies to the target year. Here, just to specify that that's the year by when the target is planned to be reached, not the year when the target was adopted. And then finally, as mentioned above, you can upload reference document for the target that you described here in these previous questions. Then With this, we move on to the questions that do refer to targets that your city has worked towards in the past. So this can include any relevant targets that had to be achieved by the year 2020 or earlier. Yeah, and where they exist, and I think this is also specified here in the help text, please do refer preferably to overall, meaning cross-sectoral emission reduction targets. Indeed, what I just mentioned, like the ones set by Covenant of Mayor signatories, where the year 2020 was an important target year. Now, if you select yes, again, we have a number of follow-up questions that we kindly ask you to fill. First, just like for the future target, there is space for a verbal description. And again, please make sure that it clearly specifies the scope of the target. Then, as we are speaking about past targets, we are also curious if the city succeeded in the end in meeting the target. So yeah, please do indicate if this is known, whether yeah, the target was achieved or not. And then we would also like to know, and now irrespective of whether the target was achieved or not, so just to highlight that this question is linked to the one here above, not to the one immediately preceding it. So what we would like to know is whether the target in question had exceeded a corresponding national target. And having said this, of course, this is only applicable for targets for which a corresponding national target existed. And an example is given here that would be, for example, the national greenhouse gas emission reduction targets under the effort sharing regulation. That should be available across. Then we have concluded with the section on targets, so we can move to those local climate policies that your city has implemented in the past or is currently implementing to achieve those targets that you described above. So more concretely, we are trying to capture in this section here on existing plans, any cross-sectoral or sectoral strategies and action plans that are relevant in your city in the context of climate change mitigation and emission reduction. We have indicated here the year 2005 as a cut-off date. There is nothing special now about the year 2005 in this context. It's simply chosen to make sure that in your answers you put the focus on the most recent policies, but also to ensure like well, a certain degree of comparability across the answers. So we start with a simple yes/no question, whether your city had adopted any cross-sectoral or sectoral strategies or action plans relevant in our context. If you click yes, then you will find a number of questions that, as we already experienced last time, might load a while to appear. It takes a while. You have the possibility to describe up to 5 such plans. So, for example, there could be an overall climate change mitigation strategy and additionally a sustainable urban mobility plan. There could be also an energy efficiency and housing action plan. And your city may want to describe them all. You simply select the corresponding number. And you will then receive for each of the plans the exact same set of questions to answer. So now let's say it's one main plan that your city would want to describe. We start by asking you to please specify for each of the plans which type of plan it is. Let me scroll down here. So the first 3 answer options that you see here indeed refer to specific plans that are linked to specific frameworks and methodologies. So sustainable energy and climate action plans, or SEAPs, those are the documents to implement the commitments under the Covenant of Mayors. So if your city is a signatory of the covenant and has developed and reported such a plan under the initiative, then please do tick this option. Even do so if your plan is not exactly called like that. A main reason is also that there is one follow-up question linked to this specific option. Then the same principle does apply for the sustainable urban mobility plans. Here again, your city, in your city, the sum may be called something else, mobility plan or whatever it is in the local context. But do please tick this answer option as long as your plan is in line with the definition and the guidelines that are brought forward by the European Commission. And then the third answer option concretely refers to sustainable urban development strategies in the context of EU cohesion policy. The other answer options, well, they are generic categories, so please choose the option that captures really the main focus of the plan that you want to describe. If no option fits, then you can simply choose one of the two other options, like other sectoral or other cross-sectoral, depending on whether your plan is horizontal or at the sector level. Then as for the name, again, please don't worry if your plan is not called plan or doesn't have the word plan in the title. We are perfectly aware that the type of policy documents that the local government can adopt and their specific names, they do vary from country to country. So please just put the official name of the document. But again, if possible for you, with a translation to English, that helps in the process. Then we do ask you, well, the detail when this plan was adopted. And then if your plan covers a specific time period, then please also indicate the end year. If this is not applicable, you simply leave this field blank. You're not forced to enter a value. On the next question, the degree of implementation. If you refer to a plan that the city has implemented in the past, please choose the answer option fully implemented, meaning if the plan is expired, even if it wasn't fully implemented, well, if it's in the past, then, well, otherwise under implementation and not yet started, if that's applicable. Then as above for the targets, also here we are asking you to indicate whether the respective plan was drawn up for the whole city or maybe an area smaller than that, like a specific site or a specific district. Then now, one thing that I wanted to mention, because here we do provide the option, answer option greater than city scale. So we are still referring to plans that have been adopted by the city itself, not plans by other levels of government. So this means that, for example, a regional or a national plan shouldn't be mentioned here or included in this section. And then the final question that we have to you on the specific plans is whether the plan contained or contains a concrete greenhouse gas emission reduction target. For example, if you describe a mobility plan which has among its explicitly stated targets or goals the reduction also of greenhouse gas emissions stemming from the transport sector, this would mean, yeah, that's a yes. It would not be sufficient if the mobility plan included measures that directly or indirectly could lead to emission reduction. It would be a no in this case. This distinction we feel is important, as generally only like clearly specified targets are monitored and progress can be tracked over time. So now we covered targets and your city's plans. Sorry, I mentioned, forgot to mention, yes, that you can also upload the plans that you were describing indeed, so that we have a reference document available if any clarifications are needed. Now, indeed, we have covered the targets and no, sorry, I missed one more thing. I mentioned it above, but it's not visible here, so I need to scroll back. There is one follow-up question that is linked to this answer option if you have selected a SECAP or a SEAP. We do ask you, in case you have a plan that your city has reported to the Covenant of Mayors, either through the My Covenant platform or the CDB ICLEI unified reporting system, whether you have received a feedback report after the mitigation pillar of your plan was analyzed by the GRC, and we'd like to know this outcome. So that was indeed now the last question on the plans, and we move to the next section of the questionnaire. So we go a bit further and look what is inside your plans, covering the three main emitting sectors in most of the cities, and that is, well, energy, transport, and wastewater. And one important horizontal topic, which is a central element of the city's mission, and that is smart city and digitalization policies. But first, yeah, we start with the energy sector. Well, it's important because sometimes in other places we do have this distinction, but here we do refer to both energy consumption and energy generation. So asking you to specify in the first question, which of the following areas are currently addressed by specific measures in your city? These are areas that are commonly addressed by urban energy policy. It is not an exhaustive list, but we try to capture the most important areas. You will maybe notice that there is also no option to specify anything else beyond what is provided here. We simply ask you to indeed select all those that do apply to your city. Then, if you click here, you do get a number of useful definitions of the maybe less known terms. And of course, you can always consult the info kit for further information on this sector, but of course, all the others as well. Then the next question does address more the how. We have the what and here the how. So we are asking you which type of energy policy measures and instruments your city is currently applying in the areas selected above. There is no direct linkage between the answers here and here, so it doesn't mean if you click this and then the financial incentives, that this would be the instrument to implement exactly measures in this area. So it's looking across all of the pool here and all of the pool here, so with no direct linkages between individual answers. Then what we have next? We have a few specific questions now, and one specific follow-up question, this one. That targets your city's energy policy measures that are related to buildings. So we would like to know which of the building categories are currently covered, so here by your measures. For these last two categories, social housing and historical buildings, I'd like to highlight that these do overlap with the other four categories. Like residential buildings may include social housing, and institutional buildings, obviously they can include historical buildings. So what I'm trying to say is that these last two should only be selected if there are really measures in place that specifically target these two building categories. Then we move on to a few more specific questions on the topic of renewable energy, looking both at the consumption and the production side. So the first question asks you to indicate how much energy in the form of electricity or heat and cold consumed in your city stems from renewable sources. So to the extent that this is possible, it should include all energy consumers in the city. But I also want to highlight that it is limited, it's referring to the stationary energy sector, so not to any other sector. So I think we received a question in this regard like for example, biofuels used in transport, it shouldn't be included here. It's linked to the stationary energy sector. What should, however, be included, and that's specified here as well, is if this information is available, of course, the net amount of certified green electricity. So certified green electricity, that would be well, electricity that comes with guarantees of origin of energy produced from renewable sources in line with the Renewable Energy Directive. Then also it is understandable that most cities won't have very detailed or accurate figures, why we do give some rather broad ranges here to answer. And as everywhere else, not known is also an equally valid answer. So then we move to the generation side, asking which share of the energy that is generated within your city comes from renewable sources. Again, it could be that there is no energy generation taking place at all. So the first answer option would be the right one. But having said this, you can, of course, also consider here a distributed local renewable energy generation if you have data available. As soon as you click on one of the options and indicate a certain share, then we have two additional questions to you that inquire about the renewable and non-renewable sources that are currently used in your city to generate energy. Well, I just want to specify on the renewables that it refers to sources that are currently used to generate energy, not like which could be in principle used. For the non-renewable energy carriers, again, in case electricity or heat coal generation activities are taking place in your city, we want to know which well, energy carriers are used in these processes. And here I have to alert you now on one modification that we made in the questionnaire after it was launched, which is to add the answer option oil. You may have noticed this oversight. You may have just ticked other in this case for the lack of oil being there. Well, now it is there and can be selected. It's one of the answer options. This was simply an oversight. It doesn't impact any of the answers or if you have filled already this part of the questionnaire. Then I have to go back, I think, now to the beginning of the questionnaire, not of the questionnaire, of this section, because one more question hidden just for you, which will just appear for those of you that are trying to mitigate the urban heat island effect as part of the energy policy. So we'll have here one additional question, because in this case, we would like to know, we'd be interested to learn more about how your city is tackling this phenomenon in its territory. These are interesting practices, certainly also for other cities in later phases of the mission. So it's interesting to know what cities are currently implementing. So that was the last question here on our question block that covers energy. We move now to transport. It follows exactly the same structure as the first two questions. Again, please do indicate all the areas that your city is addressing currently as part of its transport policy. Just to mention that here, but that's also applicable for other sectors as well, that the question is targeting your city's policy framework and measures. It can, of course, be that the policies result from legal obligations or they do originate from national policies. It's important they are implemented by your city and at the local level. We then again do have, I think, no, here it's not in the help desk, but you can find definitions and specific examples on the options listed here in the info kit. I believe most of them are probably rather self-explanatory, but maybe a word like micromobility. This would refer to these personal light electric vehicles like e-scooters or e-bikes, but I think also can include like human-powered vehicles like bicycles that you find also, yeah, in all cities like as shared vehicles. Then mobility as a service that can be defined as like the integration of various forms of transport services into a single mobility service, which is then accessible on demand. For the user, that would mean using a single application to access mobility and a single payment channel instead of multiple like ticketing systems, for example. Then in the next question, yeah, just like above for energy, please select all the types of transport policy measures and instruments which your city is currently applying in the areas that you selected above. Then, yeah, we do have, I think, examples provided here for most of them in brackets. Maybe just to give 2 additional examples for public-private partnerships and voluntary measures. You can also find some in the info kit, but like a public-private partnership in the transport sector could take the form of a concession of public land for the installation of charging stations for electric vehicles. This could be next to train stations, for example. Voluntary measures with stakeholders could be as simple as, I don't know, agreeing with local companies to have a bike to work day, things like this. We meant try to capture with this answer option. Then also this section on the transport policies finishes with one specific question here on charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. Namely, if this is if it is a requirement that is linked to building permits to provide indeed charging stations for electric vehicles. It allows for multiple options, so please tick all the building categories for which such a requirement exists in your city. Then we move on to the next sector, that's waste and wastewater management. It follows again the same structure and logic as energy and transport. First, you can indicate the areas that are addressed and then specify here again the types of measures that are applied in your city. Here again, you can find some useful definitions in the help text by clicking on this icon. See, now that would be the moment to save your questionnaire and move ahead. Before moving ahead, can you hear me well?
Yes, the sound is
okay.
good. Nadia,
Okay, excellent.
When we get through the sectors, let's pause and then we'll proceed after that.
Yeah, sounds great. So just one additional definition on the on the stormwater management. That's maybe not directly relevant in our context, but it refers to measures that do reduce the runoff of rainwater or melted snow in the streets or into streets or lawns or indeed other sites, usually with the purpose of detaining stormwater and removing pollutants. So that just as one additional definition. And just as above, we do have here one more specific question that links to which of the fractions, which of the following fractions are collected and or sorted separately in your city. It's relevant indeed because the separate collection of waste is a precondition for high quality recycling and preparation for reuse. And as such of relevance in the context of emission reduction efforts. So please do indicate all the fractions for which separate collection systems do exist in your city. What would follow next is current policies on digital and smart. So I understand we still cover this and then pause, right?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So this topic is indeed an important enabler of the climate neutrality transition, and as said, like a central element to the city's mission. What I want to say is that we do have here this dedicated block of questions on the topic, but throughout the rest of the questionnaire, it's generally treated as a horizontal topic. It's not singled out as such in the questions when we do refer to greenhouse gas mitigation policies. But please know that indeed those are always like thought along, and you are most welcome to refer to those in any of the answers. Maybe it's a good idea to start with a short definition of what we mean by smart cities. There is one in the help text hidden, but maybe a slightly rephrased one. So we would say a smart city is a place where traditional networks and services are made more efficient with the use of digital solution, indeed for the benefit of inhabitants and business. But we can also say that smart city goes beyond the use of digital technologies, like digital technologies for better resource use and less emissions. That would be like smarter urban transport networks or more efficient ways indeed to heat buildings and light them. But it can also mean a more interactive and responsive city administration, for example. So all of this falls under the smart city definition. So in the first question, we would like to know a bit more about the elements that your city may have put in place to incentivize digitalization and smart city solutions. You have the first two options that refer to strategies and policies. So this could be standalone documents, or they could also be as well part of a broader urban strategy or an innovation strategy or a sustainability strategy. That wouldn't have to be standalone documents. Maybe one less familiar term would be the innovation procurement that refers to the public procurement of innovative solutions, but buying either like the process of innovation, meaning the research and development services with partial outcomes in the end, or buying outcomes of innovation. So an innovation procurement strategy can be a combination of both, like procuring innovative solutions that are nearly or already on the market in small quantities, meaning solutions that don't require new research and development, but also pre-commercial procurement, which can be used when there are no near to the market solutions available yet. And there is still research and development to be done. It's useful indeed to link and the approaches in general as such public procurers can drive innovation from the demand side. There is more of this, so if you want to know more, you can go back to a dedicated section in the info kit that does describe innovation procurement and other aspects linked to digitalization and smart city solutions. Now, well, this first question covers the enabling environment that your city has put in place, and then there is a number of questions where your city has the opportunity to provide details on specific smart city projects that it is implementing. If there are none, or well, they are at the planning stage, that's equally fine answers. If you have projects, please do select yes, and then you have a number of questions to answer. In the first, we want you to select all the ways in which your city obtains the expertise and skills that are needed to run those projects that you are referring to. It could be available in-house or come from different, other sources. Then we'd like to know if your city carries out impact assessments of the existing smart city solutions, including looking at the environmental performance of those solutions. Then we ask you to indicate how the implementation is financed. And here again, please do look across all relevant smart city solutions and projects that you have in place when you reply to this question. And then The next question refers to partners and stakeholders that your city works with to implement smart city solutions. Again, please do look across all of them that are currently implemented in your city. And then the final question is whether your city has used any open innovation approaches and methods to enable testing, piloting, or demonstrating integrated smart. So I think, can you hear me well? My microphone again makes interesting. Sorry, I need to move this window away. No, sorry for this. Again, you can find definitions or explanations for all these answer options in the help text. So you'll have them here. You can also consult again the info kit if you would like to have further information. And then again, if your city may have used any other open innovation approaches, please do select other and explain in the text box that you have provided for this purpose. And then at the end of this block of questions on smart city projects, we would really encourage you to share further information on the nature of these projects and their scope. As really in the questions above, we don't really get insights on which types of smart city solutions your city is working on. Please also include references to the enabling policy documents that you selected in the first question. Again, all of this is valuable information also in view of like preparing next phases of the mission and the experience that cities can share with each other in those phases. Yeah, and you can upload supporting documents. So I believe now it's time for me to stop and we'll take a look at the questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nadia. Yeah, now's a good chance to pause. We've got several questions that we'll work through relatively efficiently, and then I'll make sure we move on so we keep getting through things in the time that we have. I think one of the first questions, we got somebody ready to answer as we go, which is around the target year. If the adopted target year is 2040, for example, to be climate positive or fossil free, and a 2030 target has not yet been adopted, but could be, what's necessary there. So Vipka, do you want to respond to that, please?
Yes, I can. So I think it's important to remember that at this stage, we are not asking for an adopted target. We are asking for an ambition that the city would have to become climate neutral by 2030. So this is what this process is about, to allow your city to come forward and to say, we would like to do this. How it's going to be done and how this target is then going to be set later on will be part of this climate city contract process that will start once the cities are selected, and once, together with Thomas and his team in the Net Zero Cities with the Mission platform, will then work together with us to put together a climate city contract. And then I suppose it will depend on different cities how this target will be set. But it's important to remember at this stage that you don't need to have that in place by the end of the deadline.
Can I add one aspect, just not to maybe mix the two tabs. The one that we just spoke about, the one on current policies, indeed would capture targets that have been officially adopted. But this is everything that existed pre-mission. When we speak about what Wiebke just mentioned, like your ambition and what you aspire to work towards as part of the mission, this comes and is captured in the 5th tab. And here again, as Wiebke just mentioned, it's not expected that this has been adopted or officialized in any way. This is indeed the ambition that will then be made concrete in the next phases with the Climate City contract. But in the tab that we just covered, we do refer to targets that have been officially put in place.
Yep, I think that's right. And just to, you know, as we move forward, I think it's good to note we're seeking a declaration and a demonstration of ambition. So it does need to be a serious ambition, but it's envision that not that many cities are going to have had the time and the process to have formally adopted 2030 climate neutral as a formal topic. So let's move to the next. Thanks for that question, and thanks Vipka and Nadia. We have a couple of questions speaking specifically about citizen and renewable energy communities, two different kind of communities. So there's a little bit of a definitional question there. And then there's also, if in a city there are topics addressed not directly by the city administration, but by other groups, shall we tick them like citizen and renewable energy communities? So, and there's a couple of related questions, but I'll try to do this in two parts. So I'm going to invite our panelists to speak to that. I know we have some definitions in the information kit that specifies a lot that you can go to, and the link to the information kit is in the chat. But in the citizen and renewable energy communities, two different kinds of things. Nadia, do you want to speak to that?
I'm not sure now if it refers to, sorry, I'll move to the question where I think this, so we have here citizens and renewable energy communities. I'm sorry, I couldn't see the question. Well, if one applies, then you'd be able to tick the answer, and indeed, the question is valid. These are things that are indeed implemented possibly without involvement of the city, but as long as their city provides the enabling environment, I'd consider, and those are, well, the legal prerequisites for energy communities or citizen energy communities really to be able to operate. I'd consider it a valid option for a city to tick. So
yeah, I think
sure
just
that
to build,
fully captures it.
Yep, thank you, Nadia. I think just to build on that, right? This is about policy. So if you have created the conditions in which this can happen, whether directly or just simply enabling, then you can specify that. And then you'll probably, for something like that, want to, when you provide additional information, include that. So I think that's helps to answer that. So we talked about this a little bit last week, but very quickly, and about city policy versus whether sometimes senior government does things like at the federal level or at a regional level. How do we respond to the specifics in the questionnaire? I think, Nadia, we can briefly touch on this and move on because we spoke about it last time, but it's good to remind people.
Yeah, the questionnaire, and specifically this tab, really tries to capture what the city is currently, well, which kind of policies it puts in place, the measures it implements. Obviously, and I think I mentioned it, these things may originate from other levels of government. They may be a legal obligation even, but as long as the city is the one that is acting, this is what we want to capture. If it's something that is really implemented by other levels of government and the city has no active role, this wouldn't be the place to indicate. Yeah, I think as long as the city takes action, whether it's by its own initiative or because it's mandated or obliged to do so, that both has a place.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you. I'm just going to move back up here to some of the previous ones. Is it correct, because of the EU climate and energy targets that member states have to apply, is it correct to indicate that the national climate target and its translation at the local level? And I think the answer is yes.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't find my unmute button. Yes, indeed. We specifically mentioned it in the context of comparing ambition as a reference for whether the city exceeded in its ambition even the nationally set targets. So yeah, that's indeed correct.
Indeed, great. Well, here's one about reduction percentage. Can you please elaborate on reduction percentage? If your city is aiming for climate neutrality in 2030, is this equal to 100% reduction?
That's a very good question. I think it allows us to reflect once more what we mean by climate neutrality. It depends, I'd say. If the city goes for indeed absolute zero emissions, it would be by definition minus 100% from wherever you are starting from. If, however, we speak about net zero and the possibility that there is still a share of residual emissions in the target year in 2030, it's not necessarily minus 100%. It could be then something else, and then also the base year becomes relevant if I compare, to 1990 emissions or 2005. So depends indeed on whether the ambition is to go to absolute or net zero.
That's right. That's right. It's technically net zero in the mission, but yeah, it's good to be clear. No matter what what you have when you submit it, it's good to just be clear about what it is that you do have.
Absolutely.
And we will recognize these are going to be different. So here's one that might be just a wording issue. There's a part on current policies, energy, transport, wastewater, digitalization, smart city. What exactly is the phrase politics? So maybe go to the top of the section on the sectors. Is there a word that's causing some?
I'm not sure now we have the word politics.
Yeah, that's why
we do use the word policies, and
could be.
Even the word policies, I think we tried, and also among several colleagues, to define policies. It's not doable. Policies are understood in different ways, in different settings, in different administrations. Once a policy is the overall guiding principle and the strategy follows, but then a strategy could be implemented with a set of policies, so we go in circles. Please understand it the way that is used in your context. I'm not aware indeed if we have politics somewhere. If I believe it would be an oversight, and it should be reading
I think that's exactly right. I think the key here is, this is about tangible and objective things, and politics gets quite subjective and is less about policy. So if that in fact says politics in the document, we may have a typo. We'll look for that, but we wouldn't be looking for you to try to summarize the politics of your climate action in this document. That wouldn't be the place for it. Here's a question on boundaries. If a city checks larger geographical boundary for the target earlier in the questionnaire, is it the same perimeter as the city administrative boundary in the questions here?
I have to read the question again. If a city checks larger geographical boundary for the target earlier, is it the same as? I'm not sure where early in the questionnaire. Would that be still in the additional information tab?
I'm guessing, Nadia, they may be referencing it at the very first section when they identify themselves.
So here indeed, please specify the geographic. That's not necessarily linked, because here you specify the area that you wish for which you have the ambition to become climate neutral by 2030 as part of the mission. Whereas here we do refer to targets that you already have, sorry, not here, but in this tab, that you have currently in place, that may or may not be covering the same area. So if I understood the question correctly, then the answer would be no, it doesn't have to be the same.
Great, thank you. Let's keep moving through so we can go on to the next section. There's a couple that we'll deal with in writing as we go on here. How to handle emissions from large roads passing the city but not under the city decision power. So let's answer that, and then we'll move on.
A large road that is passing the city, here these are nuances I think that haven't been well, defined. When we look, for example, at the Covenant of Mayors, there are different methodologies of how to capture the transport emissions. Generally, if it's like a motorway that passes the city, that wouldn't be included in like baselining the emissions for the city. Now, the ambition may be different in the city's mission, but again, I think here it depends on the specific circumstances of the city. When currently, well, you do have this information and you gather the data, then I think it's best practice to include it, but it wouldn't mean that you commit well, to tackling this piece later on. I think these are details that each city has to work through then as part of defining their climate city contract. But in general, yeah, assessing, accounting for transport emissions, there are different ways of doing it. Sometimes,
Right.
yeah, you only include the in boundary, sometimes the out boundary, so out of boundary. Sorry.
Yeah. All right, Jessica, I just answered yours in the chat thread, but I'll type the answer in here as well for you. But let's keep going, Nadia, to the next section.
Excellent. So there is not much left for me to describe. There is also, let me. It's just one specific section now that looks even into a greater level of detail than what we did before. So there is a section on concrete measures that does provide room for your city to showcase in more detail any key measures that you feel that stand out in terms of maybe their overall or their potential impact or their innovative nature, or maybe they stand out by the way you have formed partnerships with important stakeholders, or in the way you have engaged citizens, well, maybe through their replicability. It's really up to you to select which and how many measures that you would like to provide more information about. So we do assume there are such measures in place. So you'd select yes, and then you would specify the number of measures that you would like to describe. Again, you have space here to describe up to 5. Maybe at this place, one technical remark, it replies also to the similar questions that we had above. Maybe you decided at some point it is 3. We will describe 3, and you fill in the questionnaire, and then a 4th one appears, and you, oh, I still want to include it. You can always do that. Nothing happens. So even if you have filled already the information for 3 measures, and then you decide to go for 4, the information is retained. So no worries, you can change your mind at any point in the process. So again, once you have said, yeah, I want to describe a measure, we'd like to ask you for a short description of the measure, the main targets, the actions it encompasses, well, in short, simply what this measure is all about. Then please do indicate if the measure is at the level of a specific sector, or it's cross-sectoral or horizontal in nature. Yeah, you can do so here. Just to mention stationary energy, we covered this in the last webinar. It does capture everything that is related to buildings and facilities. Then we would like to know if this measure is still ongoing, or it has been completed, or maybe you only plan to start it in the future. And as above, yeah, please do indicate the scale of the measure. It could have covered a specific building complex or a site, or maybe it was implemented in one or several districts. If it's several districts, but not all, still district and neighborhood scale would apply. If it covers the whole city, yeah, then you select the respective option. And then finally, you do have space here to describe the results of the measure and how it really contributes or contributed to your city's emission reduction ambition. So if available, please do quantify the impact, like by providing a certain amount of greenhouse gas emission reduction that was achieved, or energy savings, or any other performance indicators that are best describing your achievements. So we have covered this section, and with this, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Julia.
Nadia, as we hand over, just two quick questions. These are easy to answer, but a couple of people are asking about what do we consider a measure? So a little bit of a definitional clarification between policy, measure, project, etc.
Yeah, again, I think here it's difficult to come up with a definition. It could be everything. It could be a specific policy that you had put in place. It could be a very specific project that you consider stands out. So don't limit yourself to like any definition. Important is, I think, that it's of concrete nature, that something that can be measured and that is, yields results in one or the other way that can be described.
So the idea here, this is a place to highlight specific actions of some detail and in a little bit more depth.
That's right.
For inclusion. So great, thank you for that. All right, so over to Julia. You need to unmute, please, Julia.
I'm sorry.
There we go.
Thank you very much. And I will stop. I need Nadia to stop sharing first. Then I can share my screen. In the meantime, thank you very much for this opportunity to go through parts of the questionnaire. My name is Giulia Piani, and I'm a project officer for the JRC, the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if you can say it correctly.
It is coming. Yes, we can.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. Nadia has showed you how this measure works in the questionnaire. And then we have basically the same sort of structure for next sections to come. So we will cover projects, we will cover initiatives, we will cover awards and benefits. And the structure is very much repetitive. So the first question asks you to please describe if your city has participated in any projects or initiatives, or it has been nominated or participated in any awards. And then if the answer is yes, you have the option to pick how many of them you want to describe. And based on how many you want to describe, then a number of similar blocks of questions will appear, as you saw for the measures. So let's start with R&I projects, so research and innovation projects, and let's look at the question. So has your city participated in any European R&I projects relevant to climate change mitigation or greenhouse gas emissions reductions since 2005 included? So let's look at different parts of this question. First, we use the term participated. We kept it deliberately vague because we want you to think about any sort of role the city has played in European R&I projects. It could have been a pilot city, it could have been a case study, but at this stage, we want you to select yes for any sort of participation. You will have the chance to specify the role of the city in a follow-up question. Then you have the adjective European R&I projects. So here we are limiting our attention to European R&I projects. As you may know, that this city's mission is built and is capitalizing on previous framework programs, on previous projects dedicated on R&I, and that's why we want to keep the focus on European R&I projects. Also to see is how much the city has been active in incorporating R&I projects and outcomes in their policy or in the projects, and so on and so forth. Then all these questions, as you can see here, come with a specific topic, which is relevant to climate neutrality. So it could either be climate change mitigation or greenhouse gases emissions reductions. And also we go for a cutoff year set at 2005. We had to put a cutoff somewhere, and we selected 2005 in order to retain only most recent projects, initiatives, awards, and also to have a basis for a fair comparison across the different cities. So as usual, if you click no, nothing appears, but if you click yes, then a bunch of dependent questions pops in. And you're asked to determine the number of projects that you want to provide information about. So again, if you click 2 or if you click 3, is the same block of questions that just repeats with a different heading, which carries the number of the projects or the initiative or the measure that you're referring to. So for the purpose of going through this questionnaire, I'm going to limit to just one of these R&I projects, and we can go through the different sub-questions. So the first one is about the project name. Here you can just declare the name of the project as it is officialized, and followed by the framework program. So here we list some of the most important and most relevant framework programs for climate neutrality. Of course, Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, but also the framework program 7 and 6, considering the cutoff year at 2005, and some other framework programs that are relevant also to horizontal aspects. Also, you have the option to select other or not applicable. So if the project is not within any specific framework program, just select not applicable. Or if it is not listed here, just go for other. In this case, you're not asked to specify further. Then, as I mentioned before, you're asked to describe the role of the city in the initiative, and you have different options here. So pilot city, case study, partner follower, and other. So in principle, pilot cities and case studies are cities that have served the purpose of demonstrating something, while followers are usually replicating some of the outcomes of the project or some of the tools that were developed. When you answer this question, try to stick to the term that was used in the official documents relevant to the project, because usually it is referred to pilot city or case study in a different way. Usually pilot cities, like they're demonstrating something innovative, while case studies is something innovative, but they're looking at their replicability or their applicability in different contexts. That's why case studies are usually more than one. And here you can pick the option that best fits your city's role in the project. After that, you have the chance to express in a free text answer what the project contribution has been when we look at advancing towards the 2030 climate neutrality target. And we will see that this sort of question comes also for initiatives and for other section of this questionnaire. Again, since we are looking at climate neutrality, when you describe how the project has contributed or is expected to contribute, please keep the focus on what is related to climate neutrality more directly, like greenhouse gases emission reductions, energy savings, and other possible performance metrics. Then this is all for the R&I projects. We have something similar for initiatives. So the first question says, has your city joined any other specific initiatives relevant to climate change mitigation, GHG emissions reductions since 2005? So exactly the same structure. Now, if you click on no, nothing happens. If you click on yes, a number of dependent questions comes up. We go again for just one initiative we want to provide information about, just for the sake of demonstrating the questionnaire. And here we have the opportunity to include some more information about initiative number 1. So first comes the request for describing and reporting the initiative name as much as it was officialized. And how would you describe the role of your city in the initiative? And here we have some other terminologies. So we have the first 3 that are sort of well-defined, like demonstrator, replicator, observer. Then we have the option other, then we have not known and not applicable. So we aim to cover all the possibilities here. But let me spend some time on the first 3 options so that they can be more better understood. So demonstrator is a city that has served as a proof of concept and has implemented any of the outcomes of the initiatives. So demonstrator are usually cities that have tested innovative concepts within the territory. There are many other ways of referring to a demonstrator-like city, but keep in mind this definition. So what they did within the initiative is to test something new, and they have implemented action. The replicator is different from the demonstrator because it has served to expand the applicability of a concept that has already been proved by implementing any of the outcomes of the initiative. And again, there are some other expressions that can be used to refer to a replicator-like city. But important characteristic is that the replicator is not testing something innovative, it's testing if this can be replicated in a different context. And then we have the observer. The observer is a city that has participated in the process concerning the outcomes of the initiative without any implemented action. So between demonstrator and replicator, there is a difference in terms of originality of innovation of what has been tested. Between demonstrator, replicator, and observer, the difference in having or not implemented any action. Follower cities could fall under replicator or observer, depending on whether they implement any action or not. So to make this even clearer, let's try with one of the initiatives. And let me go back to the initiative name question so that we can take a look at what sort of initiatives we are talking about. So we are reporting here a list of examples of initiatives. It is by no means exhaustive. And also we are looking at different levels. So we are not focusing only on European initiatives here, but also relevant national initiatives and international initiatives may be listed here. So keep this in mind when you fill in this all section. Here we provide a list of some of the ones that we consider are very well aligned with the city's mission. So the Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, the 100 Intelligent Cities Challenge, Digital Cities Challenge, the Urban Innovative Action, or Civitas City Science Initiatives. So these are examples of initiatives. This should be filled in this part of the questionnaire. And let's take the example of the 100 Intelligent Cities Challenge when we try to describe the role of a potential city that takes part to the initiative. So within this initiative, cities can be mentor cities, can be core cities, or can be part of a consortium. So if they are mentor cities, they usually test something innovative within their territory and then support core cities to expand, to scale up, to replicate the same experience. So in this capacity, mentor cities tend to be demonstrators, but it can also happen that a mentor city within the initiative doesn't develop anything new, but it just supports core cities in their transition towards more intelligent strategies. And in this case, it becomes an observer. Same applies for the core cities. These are the beneficiaries of the initiative, and they can receive support in many different ways. So depending on what is their actual role, so if they decide to test something new or just replicate things already tested by mentor cities, then they can be either demonstrators themselves or replicators. When we come to consortia, these usually are meant to provide some sort of support to group cities. So try to align them towards a common goal through webinars, through seminars. So in this capacity, they tend to be observers. But it might be that one of the cities part of the consortium, as part of this technical advice and support, runs some pilot projects, and in that capacity becomes a demonstrator. So here, just to make sure that this is extremely clear, don't look at the labels that were used within the initiative, just look at the role and at what the city has factually done within the initiative. As we saw for the projects, then we have this follow-up question where we ask you to briefly specify how this initiative has contributed or is expected to contribute to the city advancing towards the 2030 climate neutrality targets. So again, maintain the focus on contributions that are relevant to climate neutrality. And this is all in terms of initiatives. We can move to awards. So in this part of the questionnaire, we ask you, has your city ever been nominated for or participated in any awards or competitions relevant to climate change mitigations, GHG emissions reduction since 2005? If we select yes, and then we select a number of awards we want to report on, then we have the option to specify what is the award name. And here, please use the alt text whenever possible when you have to write down a name, because in this way we can avoid typos. So you can just copy paste what is written in the alt text. And then you're simply asked to provide us with the result, which can be either winner, finalist, or participant. So back to the original question, please select any awards you have participated in. It doesn't matter what was the outcome. Here we want you to report on any competition you've been or awards you've been part of. That's all in terms of awards. these two questions just replicate for any number of awards you specified here. So we can move to current policies, co-benefits and adverse impacts. Now let's go through the question first and let's see what we are asking here. So have there been attempts in your city to assess the possible co-benefits, adverse impacts generated by local scale climate mitigation policies actions and or vice versa? So here we're asking you to report on attempts to assess possible co-benefits or adverse impacts that are linked to climate policies and actions, or all the way around. So if you don't know exactly what we are referring to, this question seems a bit vague, just click one of these yes options here. Any of them is fine, because it triggers the follow-up questions where you can see a list of what we mean by benefits or adverse impacts by sector. So economic aspects, social aspects, public health, environmental aspects. So as you can see, there is a bunch of different options here. You can take a look and decide if you are assessing, so you're trying to track any of these side aspects. This question is not directional, like we are not looking at either positive or negative aspects. So whatever you tick here can have both directions. So back to the original question. You have different possibilities either for yes and for no. It's yes for all climate policies and actions, yes for most climate policies and actions. For some of them, we are preparing to perform such assessments over the next year or in the next 2 years. We are not intending to perform such assessments, and I don't know. And for any of these yes options, you're allowed to go a little bit further on this topic, and then you can tick whatever option reflects one of the side aspects that are assessed within your climate policies and actions. So as you can see, they are pretty self-explanatory, like economic aspects are job creation, revenue generation, costs. For social aspects, some of them may require a bit of attention, so that's why a bit of help is provided up here. But like we go from water security, food security to energy poverty and transport poverty that are defined here. So let's read the definition together. Assessing energy and transport poverty means to measure the amount of money spent on energy transport and selecting indicators or thresholds to define the onset of a state of condition in which citizens, either individuals or communities, lack essential resources. So in this definition, it is indeed a form of poverty, and it's well defined. Then you have other options like security protection for poor, vulnerable populations, social inclusion, equality and justice, number of households and businesses forced from homes, places of work. For any of these options, these 5 here, a follow-up question comes up, and we will look into it later on. Then for public health, we have physical health, mental well-being, quality of life, air quality, premature deaths, health costs. Most of them are self-explanatory. Environmental include the resilience to climate change, adaptation, noise pollution, light pollution, biodiversity. So we try to cover all the most important aspects that come with potential co-benefits or adverse impacts linked to climate action. So again, for these 5 options here, we are asked further information. So in your previous answer, you indicated that your city is evaluating specific social co-benefits and adverse impacts. Is your city specifically addressing any of these social aspects in its territory? So we first ask if you're assessing them. So if you're tracking them, if you're collecting data on this sort of co-benefits and adverse impacts. Now we want to know if you're doing something about it. So if you're addressing them somehow. So if you click no, of course, nothing happens. But if you click yes, we want you to provide further details or examples. And here we want you to describe any alleviation measures that the city has put in place against these specific social aspects. If you don't recall which ones are, or if you don't know which of the options that you ticked in the previous question triggered this bunch of questions, just use this help text here that tells you which of the options that we just ticked here among the social aspects trigger these questions so that you can focus your answer. So that's basically it for this step. So now we have two options. Either I go a little bit further and I move to tab 5, or we can stop to answer some questions.
We only have I think a few questions we really need to pause for, so let's tackle them and then move on, I think. So one question is, why is there a limit of 5 here? If you want to speak to what we're envisioning there.
Why is it a limit of 5? Of course, we had to make this sort of decisions. So it doesn't come with a specific reasoning or a specific justification. We wanted this number to be not too low and not too high. So we believe that 5 for measures, for initiatives, for awards could be enough for getting an understanding of the level of preparedness of the city at this stage.
Yeah, great, thank you. There's one about cooperation projects in which the city's worked together with or helped the city in another country to implement climate protection measures. Might not have reduced emissions in that city itself, but maybe somewhere else. Can these be added somewhere?
Well, this questionnaire is meant to evaluate or just to have an understanding of where the city stands in terms of climate neutrality in its journey towards climate neutrality. So these questions are meant to have an active role from the city, but also an impact on its emissions. So the two things have to be both present.
Great.
Can I add one aspect here?
Go ahead, yeah,
sorry,
sorry,
just preempting a little bit what we will be covering in the next questionnaire, next webinar on the other parts of the questionnaire. But indeed, we do get at some point to partnerships that the city has with other cities and collaboration. So there is space, at least to indicate if the city has these types of activities ongoing. Sorry, that's all I wanted to add.
Great, thank you. Okay, Julia, I think we'll try to keep tackling these so we can circle back if they're still hanging at the end, but why don't you go into the next session?
Sure, no problem. So let's move to the next step, which is about the ambition for climate neutrality. And we already covered part of it during the last seminar. So we went through the initial questions, which were about the city's overall vision and the city's ambition. Now we're going to look at future picture, closing the gap. Now, just a reminder that there is a big difference between what we looked into in tab 4 and what is covered in tab 5. So tab 4 is about whatever is current, is already been planned, officialized, and done, implemented, while tab 5 is about ambition. So we want to know what is your vision about what is going to happen within this mission. And it needs to be credible and authentic, but it doesn't need to be perfect at this stage. So we want to understand what is your current vision about what is going to be your pathway across this mission. So we're keeping this in mind. We can go through these different questions. And I want to spend some words at the beginning to describe the structure of this block of questions. So what we do here is that we first ask you which areas is your city likely to address in order to abate GHG emissions, just keeping in mind what is the final target within the mission. Then we go through different sectors. As you can see, we go through stationary energy, which excludes public lighting in this context. Then we have a follow-up on public lighting specifically, transport, waste, renewable energy generation, and other areas. So it's a bit of a different grouping compared to what we went through the different counter policies in tab 4, but we still cover all the different areas that are also touched in current policies. And as a follow-up to this question, we ask, what policy instruments does your city plan to use to support all these actions that are ticked in the previous question? So we first ask, where do you want to take action? And then we ask, how do you want to take action? And we provide with some options broken down into the different subsectors that we already mentioned. As a final question, like after we ask you what areas you want to cover and how do you want to cover them, we ask you what do you want to scale up compared to what you have already been doing in the past. So why is this? Because as we know, this mission is an acceleration towards climate neutrality. So interventions that can be scaled up, typically they come with a lower risk and can be implemented at a faster rate. So that's why we have a specific interest in understanding what you think can be scaled up at this stage. And again, and of course, across the extension of the mission. Again, we have the same subsectors, and you can provide up to 3 different interventions for the different sectors. It doesn't matter if you leave them blank. This is an option like up to 3. Back to the original question, we can go through the options and understand a little bit better what we are looking into. The first question is, which areas is your city likely to address in order to abate GHG emissions? And then for stationary energy, we have a bunch of options, which very much reflect what we already went through in tab 4. But as you may have noticed here, we have this difference between stationary energy, public lighting, and energy generation. So we go a little bit deeper into the different contributions to energy. So here we have nearly zero energy buildings for new buildings, for existing buildings, positive energy buildings. We also have like building electrification, integrating renewable energy systems into the building. For many of these options that you may not know what exactly they're referring to, please consider that in tab 4, in the corresponding questions for the current policies, we provide different definitions in the alt text, which Nadia showed you before. So you can always go back to the alt text, and you can also refer to the info kit to understand what these options refer to. So here we have all these options which tackle buildings, which tackle digitalization and smart city solutions, but also behavioral changes. So including also the people dimension, so having also the citizens and the renewable energy communities. For public lighting, it is easier. Like we will look into energy efficiency, we look into integrated renewable energy, and also in the use of information and communication technologies as an horizontal aspect. For transport, we have very similar options. Like the ones that Nadia showed you before, mobility as a service, micromobility, car sharing. We also have a parallel with behavioral changes that we have in energy, which is eco-driving for transport. So we are tackling also people's behavior. And congestion pricing schemes. For most of this, we have definitions in the info kit. Then we have options for waste, which are basically the same that you looked into in the previous tab. And then we have a separate section for renewable energy generation, where we list all the sources that we explained before in accordance with the relevant directive. And we also list virtual power plants. We list digitalization and smart city solutions. We also mention this biomass district heating plants, also a separate option for expansions and refurbishments. And then we have other areas. And these areas basically deal with the with IPPU and FLU, so with industrial processes and product use, and with agriculture, forestry, and other land uses. So, but on top of this, and we always look at both energy efficiency and renewable energy integration. We also look at natural carbon sinks, for example, tree planting, hydrogen technologies, again, urban heat island effect mitigation, mixed use development, urban regeneration. So we look at the urban planning dimension. So as you notice, most of these options are equivalent to the ones you have in tab 4. Please tick even the same options, because in this case, we know that you're going to do more on a specific aspect that is already part of the current policies, but you are also allowed here to pick new options that you envision will be part of your strategy to reach climate neutrality. Then following this first question, we ask you, how do you want to get there? for all the areas that you have ticked before. Now, if you didn't tick any option in any subsector, you always have the option not applicable. If you tick them, we understand that there is a direct link to not having considered any option up there. But also, in this case, we also have the option other that you can always tick if our list of possible policy instruments is not reflecting the one that you're going to use or the ones that you're going to use. So as you may notice, this list of policy instruments is very is limited, is not exhaustive. So please, if you feel like it, use the other tab in this case. But also you may notice that some of these policy instruments are recurring. For example, we have awareness raising training, we have grants and subsidies, we look into third-party financing and public-private partnerships, public procurement, land use planning regulation, and many other options. So here, just tick the ones that you believe will support your journey to achieving your targets in the specified areas above. And as mentioned before, this final part is about scaling interventions. And an example could be for stationary energy. If you have historical buildings in your city and you tried an innovative strategy for energy efficiency in that specific building and it worked, then you have already identified other buildings that might be treated the same way to get to a higher energy efficiency. So that is the sort of scale up interventions we are looking for. So something that you already tested in the past and that can be applied at a greater scale now that you run for climate neutrality. And another very typical one is about energy generation. So if you're planning to expand the installed renewable energy sources capacity, this is exactly the place where we want to know by how much and by integrating which sources. So that's basically it. This is the end of tab 5 on the ambition for climate neutrality. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's just see if we have some more questions coming in. We have about 13 more minutes left, but we don't need to prolong things. I just want to pause. I think we were dealing with several questions as we flowed through this, where we could provide simple answers. Nadia, I'm just going to pause a little bit, and you and Vipka, if there were some specific ones, we have a little time, you might find some value in being able to speak to. Maybe we can go back to Nadia, this one on the complete and dated inventories. Do you want to answer that a little bit more?
Yes, indeed. We had indicated in the tab that speaks to the current level of emissions, that you should reference one specific inventory, and if possible, the most recent and most complete, preferably the most recent and most complete. But now this can be competing subjects. So what is better, most complete or most recent? I would have added here just that if the more complete inventory is indeed not like very much outdated and emission figures are still or in a similar level, then preference could also be given to the more complete inventory to indeed get a more comprehensive picture of the level of emissions. Of course, if there were radical changes and you wish to emphasize a very different level of that is your starting point with a newer inventory that is maybe less complete, you need to make the judgment. But if in doubt and the figures are still valid, and that would be the case, I guess, for a 5-year-old inventory, then preference could also go to the more complete one.
Excellent.
I saw one more question now. Now that I'm speaking on SECAPs and SEAPs and SAMPs and SUDs only for cities that are members of the Covenant of Mayors. indeed, these first three answer options that we had given on the SECAPs, SUMPs and SUITs should be ticked if you have that specific type of plan in place, whatever it's called or not. A SECAP indeed would be a plan that refers to a signatory of the Covenant of Mayors. A sustainable urban mobility plan would be a plan that follows the criteria that have been defined by the European Commission of what a sustainable urban mobility plan is, and but that's not linked to the Covenant of Mayors. And the sustainable urban development strategies would be those and in the context of cohesion policy. For all the other plans that are similar in nature and cover similar topics, but are not following exactly these three methodological approaches, all the other options do cover that. So that's just something I wanted to add.
Great, thank you. I have a question on ambition. Might pause and see if Vipka or else Nadia want to speak to this, or I can, but I want to give you a little space. I'll read the question for you. Regarding climate ambition, what kind of evidence is expected to support the claims? Time is short for detailed studies. Does the mission consider further investigations as a normal way to go?
Yes, sorry, no, not yet. If you want to go first, please do.
Not at all. Please go ahead.
No, maybe I start and then you can complement. So, I mean, as we said before, as you say, time is very short until the end of January, and we recognize that, of course. So we don't expect you to start a study now and then to give us the results by then. What we're interested now is to hear about what is already there and what you're already thinking about, and to give us the picture of how you see it, together with the ambition that you would like to do it. And we know that the situation of cities will be very different in that. Some will already have very elaborate plans and maybe very concrete ideas what they need, and others may only just be thinking about it and might also not have that many things to report on in all the different sections that we have just seen. But this is not at all a reason to be discouraged and to not to apply. Please do apply in any case. If the ambition is there, if you feel like it could be something for your city, do tell us. And we have said, and maybe it's also important to recall that again, that we do want a really good balance of cities. We want to have, of course, the cities who already are very far advanced, but we also want to hear from cities who are only just starting, and want to have a good geographical balance and a good balance in terms of preparedness.
Yeah, and just to maybe build on that, because there's a related question around the inclusiveness. There is no hard and fast number of cities per member state that is being targeted or associated country. I think it's fair you can extrapolate 100 across the member states and associated countries and have a number, but that has no meaning absent more context around both the size and the distribution of cities across across Europe. So it's certainly not going to be a mechanistic thing. It's going to be an assessment and a judgment about how to make the mission as inclusive and representative as possible, noting that in some countries you're going to have fewer than you might have in others, and that's just to be expected.
Yeah, we have said at least one city from each member state. That would be really, that's what we're working towards, of course.
Yeah, that's but that's a goal, right? There's no requirement. There's no like must have. We're seeking to be representative, inclusive. It requires us to use some judgment in how that comes together in the selection process. And when I say we, not me, because I won't be involved in that. Scaled up actions. We have a sustainable city lab. Is it possible to explain work in progress actions? I think the answer is yes. You should be able to include that. There's a question around domains, and I want to get this one out there to make sure we address it. And Sarah, maybe type a follow-up if we're not clear here. What if you're working in several domains, though it is not realistic to aim for climate neutrality by 2030 in all of those domains? Should you still list them? And I think the short answer is yes, but Nadia, I think you're going to have more to say here.
Yeah, if this refers to the section on the future plans, I'm not sure if I understand the question right, but if the assumption is that they wouldn't lead per se to climate neutrality, I'd say, of course, if they go in the right direction, please do list them all.
I think it's also maybe what I would infer from this is they're working across several domains. They may think they can get towards climate neutrality in, say, building energy use by 2030, but maybe not in mobility. I think that may be the difference here. And so, of course, you should include all of those in your inputs into the process. We recognize the uncertainty about what is going to happen in the next 8 to 9 years. So that's very fair. We also have a target for reducing consumption-based CO2 emissions. Where can that be included? I'll let you speak to that, Nadia.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. We do give a space here to cover one specific target, and if that's an additional target, indeed, to the one that you might want to specify, there is no specific space to cover it. Indeed, simply because it's outside the scope of the mission or the level of ambition that is generally sought now. I hope that could be maybe captured in a section where you can describe measures that can be scaled up. So maybe you have specific actions that are linked to this target for reducing consumption-based emissions. So it would still be a place to indicate the related activities that the city has, even if it's not the one target that you refer to in the section that we covered today.
Excellent. Here's one question that's been there for a little bit on R&I projects. Could you kindly explain the difference between pilot cities and case studies?
I can take it. So there is a fine line between the two. If in the official documents your city is referred to as a pilot or as a case study, please stick to the official document. In case it's not, but your city has had a sort of demonstrator-like role within the project, please keep in mind that it would be considered a pilot city if it has run some proof of concept testing, while more as a case study if it has checked, it served the purpose of checking if a given solution is actually replicable in another context. That's what a case study usually is used for. And usually when you're a case study, there are other case studies within the same projects. So these are the sort of features that you should look into in determining if you're a pilot city or a case study.
Thank you. Okay, I know we're coming up on the end of 2 hours. Time flies when we're going through these details. I want to thank everyone for joining again. And I want to thank Vika, Nadia, and Julia for preparing and helping take everyone through all the information that we shared. I'd also note, not only are these recorded and available to come back to from the website, but you are also welcome to send us questions through the website, through the email that's provided, contact email that's provided, either through the Commission's website, or you can also go to Net Zero Cities, although we would just take that question over to the Commission for you. So maybe start there just to ensure everybody gets it efficiently. But we're happy to carry on and helping answer questions and clarify things where appropriate. And then maybe just a final comment, we will have our third webinar. And Vika, I'll just have you preview the topics in a second here. And that is going to be on Wednesday, the 15th of December, at this same time, from 2 o'clock to 4 p.m. Central European time. So Vika, you want to just briefly touch on what we're going to focus on, although we're going to try to make sure we cover all the sections remaining.
Yes, indeed, it's the remaining sections of the questionnaire. So the main items that we had mentioned earlier were capital needs, barriers, and assistance needs, but this will actually cover all the remaining sections of the questionnaire. And if I find it again quickly, I can also remind colleagues. So partnerships, capital needs and investment strategies, governance, and then barriers, risks, and assistance needs. So sections
Right.
6 to 9.
Great. And the recording of these will be available on the Commission's webpage. Yes, that's where to go look for them.
Yes, indeed. I mean, for now they're in the YouTube channel, and we've pasted the
Right,
link.
yes.
We will also put them onto the normal website. It just takes a day or two until they are uploaded there.
And the YouTube channel, is it a European Commission one, or is it more focused?
This is the RTDs, so the Research and
Perfect.
Innovation YouTube channel, but it might be a bit tricky to find it there. So we have maybe we can just post the link again in the chat for the last one. And then in a few days, they will then also be available simply on the normal Cities Mission website.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. And with that, it's 4 o'clock. And so I want to thank everyone again and wish everyone a good rest of the day and evening.